All right, we are back from our lunch break. It's now 1:58 p.m. I will now turn the gavel over to Member Vasquez, who will present the informational hearing on the 2025 wildfire disaster relief and recovery legislation and other solutions. Tony?
Thank you, Chair Gaines, and thank you, members, for allowing me this opportunity to begin this process. I know it's going to take a while, but I just want to thank you all and welcome everyone to this informational hearing on the Los Angeles County wildfires. This afternoon, we are focusing on the property and economic losses and the solutions towards recovery, including laws administered by the assessor and board for guidance, as well as new legislation. The assessor has launched a variety of property tax relief tools that are and will continue to help people who lost homes and businesses, and even churches and nonprofits, by reducing their tax burden. In some cases, board guidance and support may help to effectuate even greater assistance to property owners. The legislator on both sides of the aisle has been hard at work submitting almost 24 new bills addressing problems, everything from the need to stop price gouging victims seeking rentals or housing, to providing temporary mortgage relief, to increasing criminal penalties for looting or impersonating firefighters, to changing the property tax lien date and allowing assessors maximum discretion when determining comparable new construction. In short time, my intent is that we hear from those most critical and relevant, beginning with my assessor, Jeff Prang. Ms. Cicchetti, do we have Mr. Prang on the line?
We have Mr. Jerry House for Mr. Prang
Okay.
on the line.
Can you
Hello,
please-
everybody. This is Jerry. Can you hear me?
Is it Gary?
It's Jerry.
Jerry, thank you.
Yes. Well, first, I want to thank you for having me. I'm a director at the Los Angeles County Assessor's Office, and I'm here on behalf of Mr. Prang to tell you some of the things we've been doing. But first, I want to thank the Honorable Member Vasquez and the Board of Equalization for inviting us to participate in this roundtable of esteemed civic leaders. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge the first responders who fought for the fires and are leading recovery efforts after these devastating events. It has been estimated that the number of structures identified in the burn area consists of 21,000 parcels. The 21,000 represents damaged structures or within fire perimeters, or filed an M&C claim, or CAL FIRE has completed an inspection. The assessed value of those properties consists of $22.5 billion of land value, $11 billion in improvement value, for a total assessed value of approximately $33 billion. As many of you may already know, the assessor's office has been working diligently to provide property tax relief to impacted homeowners. Through our misfortune and calamity program, homeowners can have their properties reassessed at a lower value while their homes are being rebuilt. To qualify, homeowners must have at least $10,000 worth of damages to their properties and file a claim within 12 months of the disaster. The assessor will be able to reassess the damaged properties by removing the improvement value, and in this particular case, provide a % reduction to the land value. A major improvement is the new misfortune and calamity claim form online, which can be filed anytime, anywhere, from any device, including a smartphone. This enhancement is part of our commitment to modernize services and making them more accessible. But we're not stopping there. We are proactively evaluating every property in the disaster zone, whether or not an application has been received. We've successfully implemented this approach in previous disasters, ensuring that no property owner eligible for relief is overlooked. For those whose property taxes are due while their misfortune and calamity claim is under review, we are working with the Treasurer and Tax Collector's Office to provide deferral options for eligible taxpayers. This program will allow homeowners to defer the property taxes during reconstruction, provided the homeowner pays their own taxes and not through an impound account. For homeowners whose properties weren't physically damaged, but whose market value has dropped significantly due to disaster, there is a decline in value review. This program allows us to lower property's tax base if their economic or market value falls beneath their assessed value. Some homeowners may not benefit if they already have a low tax base. Unfortunately, under current law, this program only applies to the assessed value of properties on January 1st. Without legislative amendments, victims of this year's wildfires will need to wait until next year to apply, as the fires occurred on January 1st of 2025. Our office is working closely with state leaders in Sacramento to explore legislation to provide fire victims more immediate relief. Currently, our office is working on proposed legislation with Senator Ben Allen and Sasha Perez. Our legislative relief package consists of extending the misfortune and calamity filing deadline from 12 to 24 months, extending the special property tax exemptions for damaged religious, charitable, or hospitals, essentially the welfare properties, facilities, to 8 years, extending the deadline for homeowners to begin rebuilding their home without an automatic restoration of their original pre-disaster tax base from 5 to 8 years, solving the heirs issue by extending the filing period for prop claims from 6 months to 3 years from the receipt of a notice of a supplemental or notice of escaped assessment. Lastly, granting the assessor discretion to determine the appropriate date of damage for purposes of reassessment. The last provision came as a result of the Ranchos Palos Verdes landslide disaster. During that incident, it was difficult to determine a disaster date given the ongoing nature of the land movements. With this authority, the assessor can make that determination and alleviate any confusion that may pervade for homes who suffer more post-fire damage from mudslides. Every day for the past few weeks, our team has been working at FEMA's local assistance and disaster recovery centers near UCLA and Altadena to help homeowners fill out these forms and understand the process behind them. Other public outreach includes staffing resource centers hosted by IATSE and the Society of Cinematographers. Future events include staffing resource centers hosted by FACE and First AMC Church. That's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I can certainly take them.
Yes. First of all, let me back up a little bit. I just wanted to also thank, you mentioned your office, Jeff Prang, my assessor, has been real active with this once this disaster took place. But we also had some real good partnerships with our LA Mayor, Karen Bass, our LA County supervisors have all weighed in. Two state senators that are really impacted by it. We're going to hear from them a little bit later, Senator Ben Allen, and then also Senator Sasha Perez, one representing the Palisades area, which is Senator Allen, and then also Senator Perez, who represents Altadena. But moving forward, I have a couple questions, and I'll open it up to the members and see if they have others. My question to you or to your office, the assessor, would be, one of the major difficulties of dealing with disasters of this scale is keeping in contact with homeowners, and in many cases, only physical addresses that they have from the from the assessor's office may be property which was destroyed. So what has happened, or what have you folks created to do, or to be able to outreach to these folks that not only maybe lost their residency address, but also their business address?
Okay, so thank you for that question. Well, the office has modified its website to include added information banners added the ability to file online and to apply for newsletters to keep them informed, but also to register their property. And if they register their property, this will give them updates about their claims, the status of their claims, and where exactly that is. We also, on our site, make it easy for them to update the records and let us know where they at and where correspondence can be sent. And so every day at the resource centers, and we have 2 of them, for a while we had 3, we are asking them to fill out the newsletter, register their property, asking them these questions, and seeing if we need to register or make a change in address to stay on top of where the correct any correspondence should go. In addition, we've also set up that they can make an appointment through MS Bookings with any of our proposition ownership specialists to address their specific situations. And once again, when they're at the resource centers, we have the ability to do that almost immediately, book them an appointment.
Thank you. My second question is, the governor has issued a number of executive orders related to property tax taxation relief, most directly with Order N-1025, which prevents penalties and interest from being imposed for late property tax payments until April 10th of 2026. How does this relief add to the existing disaster relief provisions which our office is implementing?
Sure.
Member Vasquez, this is Lawrence Liu. I'm here with Director House. I'm Special Assistant to Assessor Jeff Prang. Thank you for your question. It goes actually hand in hand with the governor's executive order. Our treasurer and tax collector is currently deferring any penalties on property tax collections for taxpayers that have filed their misfortune and calamity claims. So they won't be receiving any sort of bill until a supplemental tax bill is generated from their misfortune and calamity valuation, or if they've received any sort of notice from the assessor's office that their calamity claim was denied. So really they will piggyback off of each other, whichever gives the longer time. They're able to defer their tax payments for that period of time.
Thank you. I have several questions. I'm going to ask one more and then I'll open it up. And then if there's no more questions, I'll come back to a few others I have. Another question I have is, what kind of help can we provide to you and other assessors whose counties have been affected?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are currently in the Revenue and Taxation Code, there are certain concepts that are described in the remedies provided under misfortune and calamity that are a little vague to interpret, and so we have been reaching out to your office, and thank the BOE for providing such great help to us in interpreting some of these, some of the terminology that is vague to us. And we have reached out quite a few times on possible suggestions on how to carry out certain remedies, or even if legislative action is required.
Thank you. Let me turn to see if there's any questions before I continue. I see a couple hands. Let me start with the Vice Chair Lieber. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to the presenters for being here today, for Mr. Prang. A question that I have about the legislative fixes that have been mentioned, such as providing relief on the January 1st trigger so that property owners wouldn't have to wait until next year to recoup their losses. I'm not sure if that's the exact terminology on it, but how many of these fixes are specific to this period of disaster, or are triggered anytime that there would be a similar disaster in which the governor puts forward a disaster declaration?
That's a great question. We designed this bill specifically for these fires only.
Okay, and do you already have a bill number for this?
We do not.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Controller, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. I want to thank you for holding this hearing. And gentlemen, I want to thank you for your presentation. So if we just kind of zoom out, how long is this rebuild and recovery looking? Any specific
there's-
timelines?
Well, the office currently went to work proactively on building in functionality to our new operating system to do automated valuations. We anticipate starting the first tranche of valuations, maybe 9,000 of them, 8 or 9,000 in early April. We estimate that we're going to be able to complete 60 to 70% through automation, and the remainder are going to be more slow work that we have to do manually and interact and get information. And so we're shooting for June, although it could go beyond that.
Understood. And then my last question, what avenues have you taken to publicize some of the information coming out of the assessor's office?
Well, there's been several fronts. I know that Mr. Prang's been out in the media. We are attending meetings such as this in the community, going out into the public every opportunity several times a week. We are located at the 3 resource centers now too, typically from about 7 till 9 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, although that went down to 6 coming up here. So from the very beginning, we've been proactive in getting our message out. We've updated our websites. We've worked with our partner agencies to get their typical ask questions synthesized with ours and cross-promoting the messages in that manner. So every way and any way possible, we've been doing that.
Absolutely.
Assessor Prang is also, he writes special bulletins on this topic, and we release special bulletins, I think on a monthly basis. It could be actually more frequent. And we're posting on our social media platforms as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Vasquez, if I may, I did have one other question come to mind. The governor had an executive order that prohibits price gouging and underselling of homes. I think it's a 3-month prohibition. Is the assessor's office enforcing this?
Well, I don't believe that that's in our purview. We don't control sales of the market. We merely are the persons that go out when something's transferred, we put a value on it, but we're kind of reflective of the market. We're not participants in it.
Understood. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck.
Thank you.
Member Schaefer, did you have a question down the table?
Yes. I wanted to ask you, is Assessor Prang okay? I was expecting to see him today.
Yeah, Assessor Prang is actually caught up with our annual budget with the County Board of Supervisors. And it just so happens that his meeting with the County Board is at 2:00 p.m. And we thought it would start at 1, where he was going to pop in to speak, but since we went to recess, he was unable to attend.
We're just having a telephone conversation. I was expecting to visuals. Is there some reason you were not able to go on screen?
No, there's not. And I can give you a visual.
Oh,
I will share my screen. I'll give you an example of some of the outreach we've been doing. So the relief can you see my screen?
yeah.
Okay, so when we interact with the public, their questions are typically the one that we encounter the most are, hey, what are the rules of rebuilding? What are my options? How does all this work? And so it's a bit complicated. So we put together this cheat sheet that kind of summarizes the different options available to them, letting them know that, hey, first, you need to make a decision. When that time comes down the road, your decision that you'll need to make is, are you going to rebuild, or will you acquire a replacement property and transfer your original base value to that property? If you decide to rebuild, here are the two MNC provisions. They're slightly different. You qualify for both, and you will receive the one that provides the maximum benefit to your situation. We can't determine that at this time because we don't know how long or what they're actually going to build. But keep in mind, these are the provisions that are out there for rebuilding. And if you decide to instead acquire a replacement property, well, here's the options as well. You can see here Proposition 50. That is the only proposition that allows you to transfer your original base value to a property that is other than residential. So if you had a commercial building or an industrial building, Proposition 50 will be the one that is going to be your only option. And that's the one that allows you to acquire a replacement property, but only within Los Angeles County, the same county. That's an intra-county option. The other two provide relief, the ability to transfer your original base value to a single family residence. Some in other participating counties that have the ordinance, and Prop 19 is anywhere in California. They're all slightly different, but we just try to make available to them and explain what their options are when we get down the road further and they're getting closer to making that decision. So that's kind of some of the things and the visual that I have for you.
Thank you. One closing thought. You have the jurisdiction, maybe with the permission of the Board of Supervisors, to be proactive and do a reduction without getting an application. That may be particularly important here because so many people have lost their secretarial tools, their ability to communicate, their papers and all that stuff. There's also a lot of wealthy property owners who are hurt that are from foreign countries and have language problems. I would like your office to be aware if there should be an application and you're not getting it, you might be proactive and seek out the application, assuming you have the approval of the Board of Supervisors to do so. Thank you.
Yes, we do. That's in our ordinance, so we are proactively, we're not requiring them to file an application. If we're aware of some property's been completely damaged, or we are proactively going ahead and doing that.
Thank you.
As I'm looking at your split screen, are we able to get a copy of that matrix you have on the screen? And, you know, we should probably post that on our website. It's pretty good information from what I could see.
Sure, we'll send that to you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll send it over after our meeting today.
I have a couple more, right? I have a couple more questions and then I'll turn it back in case there's others. But I have a couple questions about properties other than homes. For example, for businesses that were partially destroyed or shut down or completely cut from customers or commercial activity, do they have an option to receive a declined in value assessment based on those conditions?
Are you talking about personal property? Are you talking about business, personal property fixtures, things of that nature? Yes, they are entitled to decline in value relief. That's always, for businesses, their assessment is always based on the lien date. So.
Thank you. And then, oh, go ahead.
Let me say this too, because the bills for the low ordinance, and if any business was removed, then they wouldn't be receiving a bill. It would be no added value. Since on the lien date, that would have all been gone.
Thank you. Finally, there are a number of properties like churches and other nonprofits that receive welfare exemptions, but which were destroyed in the fires. In order to qualify for that exemption, the property needs to be used for the qualifying purpose. Do the assessors have, or currently have, an exemption for those folks? Or authority, I should say.
So currently, that's sort of a tricky topic. We do have, we are working with Senator Allen on legislation that sort of addresses this situation, where we would be able to continuously grant the exemption during the period that they are rebuilding. But currently in the Revenue and Taxation Code, there is a provision, it sort of may give us a little bit of leeway to continuously grant the exemption for them, as long as that they have the intent to rebuild. And if they show that they have the intent to rebuild, then we would treat that their exemption was not abandoned, and we could still provide it to them. But there are caveats to that, and that's why the legislation is important, to sort of patch those caveats.
No, I appreciate that, because at a couple of the hearings or roundtables that I attended, there was some church groups that came up and they said, we're technically out of business because of the fire, but we're just fearing the worst, that we're going to get a tax bill since we're not up and running, and we're, and we technically, if we're not up and running, we lose that exemption. So appreciate whatever you can do to help those folks. And I think I have a follow-up question from my Vice Chair, Ms. Lieber.
Thank you. To the presenters, as you're formulating the legislation, I'd be interested to know if it can accommodate, say, if a church is demonstrating intent to continue, would it qualify, would it qualify if, for example, they had been operating as a church and they have an intent to have another 501c3 use, such as they intend to continue as a shelter, or some other use that's also a nonprofit. I think I could see a church having their facility destroyed, partnering with another church, or using a disused church space, and then wanting to use their original space for another nonprofit or public benefit use. And you don't need to respond back to me, but if it's possible to accommodate that in the bill, I think it would be a benefit. Thank you.
Member Gaines, I believe Chair has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Member Lieber in terms of that church use, because maybe they could even rent space, but maybe it takes a couple of years to rebuild. I think it would be a longer timeline than it would to rebuild a home, and so we'd want to make sure that they were able to retain their tax exempt status. Another question I had, if you could help, would be, let's say I'm a homeowner, my home is burned down in the LA fires, and am I exempt of having, or at least delayed in having to pay any taxes?
Yes, you don't, the tax bill is deferred until April of 2026, and tax collector is advising that you don't make, if you haven't made the second installment payment, not to make it. The payment is deferred, and even though if you pass the due date, no penalties or negative assessments will accrue.
Okay, thank you, because I think you might have a situation where people are trying to figure out whether they are going to rebuild or not, and it just may be difficult to find a contractor, and that could take time, and then they could ultimately decide not to build and simply sell the lot. So, maybe Senator Allen's bill would provide that clarity in terms of if you're in between. Seems to me folks should still get that exemption while they're trying to make a decision, given the logistical challenges of trying to rebuild after a wildfire. Has there been any discussion about a tax credit? I know that we had discussed it, I think at last month's meeting, and I think Member Cohen, Controller Cohen, was talking about that. I don't know if there's been further discussion or not, but just wondering, from your vantage point, is that being discussed or proposed?
I don't believe that's sort of in the purview of the assessor's office. So there had been no discussions, at least to my understanding, of the assessor being involved in any sort of legislation involving a tax credit.
Not at this point, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
not at this point.
Okay, very good. And how about the, with regards to value reduction, how quickly is that happening?
Well, as I said, this is the largest magnitude we've had. There's 21,000 properties in the perimeter, but we have tested, and we're going to be automating. We believe we're hoping for up to 70%. We're going to be able to start the first one in early April. So we're going to try to automate. There's some data cleanup that we're undertaking now to help us maximize the amount of valuations. That can be automated, but we're going to be starting in April. And then what will remain will be the ones that are worked in the typical fashion that require interaction, applications, more data to justify or inform us the extent of the damage, and those will be a little bit slower.
Okay. And so how does this work in terms of, I mean, is this it's a delay at this point, is that right? Is it a delay of paying taxes until April of 26?
That's right. It's a delay. You're going to ultimately you're going to have to pay them, but it's been delayed and no penalties or costs will accrue, until April of 2026.
Okay, and then that would be, the taxes due would be based on just the land value, is that right?
Right. Once we start for most of these, we're going to be removing the land value. It was a total damage, and also adjusting the land value down as well. And the improvement value, those reductions will stay on until such time as they rebuild and the market returns for the land.
Yeah, until April of 26, but that could be extended either by
Well,
statute.
right. April of 26 will be based upon the value. If they haven't built, it'll still be billed upon the value without an improvement. And that reduced value will continue on beyond April of 26 until at such time it's rebuilt.
Good, and it sounds like that's all going to be retroactive in terms of bringing the value down to the date of loss.
Yes, as of the date of loss. Right.
Yeah,
And we're
okay.
working with CAL FIRE's provided some phenomenal information, and they've had boots on the ground to give us estimate of damage on a parcel by parcel basis with photos. And so that's really going to help us with the automation.
Okay, very well. So it sounds like the taxpayer doesn't, I should say the property owner and taxpayer doesn't have to do anything in terms of paying taxes until that April of 26.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And if they made the payment in full, once they pay both in full in advance, once we are able to value the property, they will get a refund.
Yes, okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you, Tony, for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Along those lines, well, I guess we'll be, when we're talking to a couple of the senators a little bit later, we definitely need to look at an extension here because I just don't see this thing happening by 26.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned also the issue of, well, I guess at some point, I'm sure you'll get back to us in terms of any guidance or LTAs that you think might be useful as you're moving forward, especially some of these extensions and gray areas as we're looking at these exemptions, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Oh, Deputy Controller has another question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Before I let you go, gentlemen, I did have one more question. Is there any resource in your office or elsewhere you recommend to assist the taxpayer in filling out applications or answering any questions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. Our assessor's webpage has an FAQ designed specifically for misfortune and calamity. And I believe we have a specific page that's now designed for these wildfires. And there are FAQs that are fire specific to the incident, and it helps. It's a great resource in giving you answers and guiding you on how to complete the completion of these calamity forms. And there is an option now to file these forms online. So you don't have to print it out, fill it out, and then email it or mail it to our office. It can be submitted directly online.
And they can also be submitted through our staff when they come to the disaster relief centers. If they come up and we're answering their questions and giving them this cheat sheet or the frequently asked questions, we can sign them up or help them fill out their application for relief right then and there.
Wonderful, thank you. If you can forward that link over to Mr. Member Vasquez or the executive director, and she can get it to us at the State Controller's office, that'd be great. Thank you.
The last question I had is refers to the lien date. You know, California properties are generally assessed as of the lien date of January 1 of the given year. In this case, that was less than 1 week before the windstorm and fires began. Can you talk about problems of the lien date being before or but just before the date of the disaster, and whether your office has any discretion to act on its own to address these problems?
Well, as you know, under decline in value and under tax law, the value is based upon the value of the property on the lien date, which is January 1st. So we have to consider and value the property for its assessment purposes on January 1st. So given that the damage and the fire took place, I believe on the 7th or 8th, it was after the lien date. And so under the current law, we would be able to consider it because that was not the condition of the property on January 1st. That's why we have put in proposed legislation, kind of a one-off, asking us to be allowed to say, hey, the value on the lien date will be the value of the property on January 7th. So we could take in consideration the damage of the property because they missed it by a few days, and say we're allowed to value it in its condition on the 7th, but that will be the value for January 1st for the full fiscal year. So we have that language proposed, but currently under current law, we would not be able to take it into consideration. And that's why I said for declining value, they would have to wait till the next year.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other questions, I think we're good. Want to thank you and your office and several of you that stepped up, and thank my assessor, Jeff Prang, for giving you this opportunity and to be able to clear some of the issues that we're discussing here. But as we move forward and we listen to the senators a little bit later, I'm sure we'll have some follow-up questions down the road. But thank you and appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Ms. Cicchetti.
Yes, hi. We're going to do a couple out of order on the agenda, just to accommodate our speakers and the times that they are available. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to jump over to item number 13, which is public comment on the informational hearing, just to get things going. So members of the public are invited to provide comment on the informational hearing. In the event that a member of the public who wishes to provide a public comment is unable, for any reason, including the time constraints, you can submit a written comment onto our website, boe.ca.gov. There's a link that you could submit a written comment, and we would distribute them to the board members. So let's see here. We could go out to the AT&T moderator. Could you let us know if there's anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment for this informational hearing?
Yes, and on the phones, if you'd like to make a public comment at this time, it is 1, then 0. We have no lines in queue at this time.
Okay. Okay, so since we have no one online right now, because it is a little bit earlier in the agenda, we're going to take a quick little break, and then we'll be available for when the speakers who are available at certain times. So let's try to give us a 15-minute break right now. Oh, did you
Can
have
we hold
something?
just for a minute?
Yes,
I got a text from my mayor. I think she's trying to call in.
Okay, okay.
Let's see if she gets through.
Okay, let's do that. Is she on the AT&T line? She called into Teams earlier. Yeah, okay.
AT&T would let you know if she's calling, right?
If there's someone on the line, yeah. Yeah, she was on, she came into Teams earlier, so let's see if she's getting through. We could just hold off.
Okay, it looks like she's trying to get through. She might be
Okay.
there now.
Let's see here.
And excuse me, this is the AT&T moderator. If she is on the line, on the phone lines on hold, or excuse me, in the conference, if you just say her name and give her the instructions, 1 then 0, she can place her line in queue to speak.
See if she's, I don't have her on the Teams yet, if that's the way she's coming through.
Was it another text or?
I just shot her another one
Oh, you
back.
did, okay.
It sounds like she has joined Teams. And so, there we go. Well, welcome, Ms. Negrete.
Hello, Mayor.
Hi.
How we doing?
Good. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you and see you.
Thank you for having me on.
If you can give us a little update, I know, most of the city, well, actually, the city itself didn't really experience too much of the fire, but you're getting a lot of the aftermath, especially with businesses, because the PCH basically was shut down, which covers quite a bit of the city of Santa Monica, even though technically there was no real fire damage. I think there was a lot of business and commercial damage.
Yeah, I mean, so we didn't have any structure damage, thankfully. And we did have evacuation areas on the northern part of our city. And we also, had experienced a small sliver of our community in Santa Monica has DWP as its water source, unlike the rest of our city, who is on our own Santa Monica water system. So they have had a do not drink order. So we've experienced, it from that perspective. And then most recently, the biggest concerns in terms of like community concerns environmentally have been, the debris and the ash sediment that's washed up on our beaches, impacting Santa Monica beaches, of which we just started cleaning up today and building a berm at the storm drain. So that's been really concerning because the beaches are obviously closed. That affects travel and tourism and also makes our folks who live in Santa Monica on the beach and, constituents and visitors and businesses all concerned. And then the impacts on not just PCH, but even today, they closed the 4th Street exit again. So that keeps sort of happening for a long period. We had both Lincoln Boulevard and 4th Street, which leads into our downtown area, closed. I was able to work with agencies and get that opened back up a couple weeks ago, and then it would close again due to, I'm assuming debris issues going into PCH. I'm not really sure why it's closed today. I'm sure there's a reason as they're dealing with shoring up the mountainside and things like that. So all of those things are impacting our people coming into work, our people coming into shop in the downtown area. And then, of course, because people don't always understand geographically how we're laid out, there's been the broader issue of, long-term, looking out a month, 2 months, folks canceling hotel reservations. So although we saw an influx the first few days of evacuees in our hotels, and we have some of those evacuees still in our hotels, we saw a huge decrease when we evacuated our own Santa Monica area and everybody in Palisades kind of pushed out. So there has been some uptick in like long-term parking at our hotels that we haven't seen before. But really, I think the biggest issue is like the optics externally are that if you live outside of California or really outside of Los Angeles, people assume that our whole beachfront is kind of like, a row of burnt palm trees and we're not open for business. So we're balancing this act of saying we're open for business. It's the oxygen first mentality. We have to make sure that our local economy is strong and able to sustain our own community. And then also, in order to be able to assist our regional and neighboring cities, we have to have a strong local community economy as well. So our small businesses are suffering. They were coming off of PPP. I have to be honest, as a small business owner myself, who has been impacted because I had a large percentage of our customers were Pali schools and students and residents. We have seen a financial impact immediately, and we, are not eligible for an SBA loan because if you're still paying back a PPP loan, then you weren't eligible for some of these FEMA SBA business type loans. So we just had a town hall. Well, we didn't have a town hall. Department of Health had a town hall addressing the beach issues. We got clearance to clean our beaches. We hope that will help make our beaches a little bit more inviting and quell some concerns around toxic, hazardous debris runoff from the rains and the fires. But next week on the 26th, we're hosting another town hall more specific to Santa Monica and having FEMA and SBA to talk about both individual financial assistance and business assistance. And I gave them the notes that they really need to take a look at. SBA needs to take a look at those folks that are already in good standing paying back their SBA PPP loan, that those folks might now be in need of further financial assistance post this fire.
Thank you. The other, I had a question. I know we were just talking to some of the business owners that were impacted, specifically in the Palisades. So some of those folks will be eligible for what they call a decline to value. And in your case, since they really didn't, well, they're losing some revenue source, I'm wondering if you're getting many calls about that from some of the business owners. Yeah, especially in,
You mean like
in that downtown area.
That own the property?
Yes.
So I think it's interesting because it's more the business operators, and I'm in a lease in Santa Monica, and it's triple net, as we all understand, right? So I haven't received any calls, and I'm working, closely with the chamber and with the business community. But what I've from the landlords or from the property owners, however, I have received more concern from the business operators from that standpoint. And if those types of concessions are made, I hope it's passed down through the leases, because all of us are paying triple net, and already before the fires, a lot of people were finding it too expensive to do brick and mortar style business in Santa Monica. So because we know that shopping trends have changed and whatnot. So I haven't heard that. I've heard more businesses being impacted by way of, at the beginning, it was like workers couldn't even come in because the freeway closures. Then there was people's homes who were impacted. And then, of course, we weren't realizing that the patronage of our local businesses, that was more the concern.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, my deputy controller has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pleasure to see you on here, and extend my heartfelt thoughts and wishes with you going through what I can't imagine is a very, very tragic time in your community, but leaders like yourself are helping rebuild faster than ever before. My question has to do with keeping tenants in their homes and people from evictions. Is this something Santa Monica is working on? And also, unhoused residents, are Santa Monica building temporary shelters in the meantime?
So We came out with an emergency order the first Friday from that from the fires and made sure that we made tenant protections very clear. That's a priority in Santa Monica already. And we also made some specific ordinances around price gouging. So those were all things already a priority for Santa Monica, and we just accentuated those things. In terms of shelter for our unhoused population, we have our ongoing Samo Shell and other people concern shelter operations, American Red Cross. We didn't have an issue with the Palisades fire victims or anybody coming to Santa Monica from the Eaton or Hughes fires or to looking for that were unhoused. We were more servicing evacuees from Santa Monica, and some were. I did meet with a handful of evacuees staying at the disaster relief center in West LA. But we didn't have a need to build additional shelters. I'm assuming you're talking about post the fires, as a result of the fires. If anything, those shelters that are ran and operated by not just American Red Cross, but Salvation Army, they have a protocol where they don't ask you, like you didn't have to prove that you were a fire victim to stay there and access a cot or food or any assistance. But after the fires were contained and the emergency was, I don't want to say over, but the emergent part of it was over, then they started to engage in conversations to figure out who was staying at the shelter. So the production of those shelters, which weren't in Santa Monica, ended up probably providing a roof over people's head and food, even if they weren't impacted by the fire. I hope that answers your question.
It did. That's pretty amazing. My last question, Madam Mayor, would be: are the schools back open in Santa Monica, and the kids that are affected in other school districts, are they allowed to come transfer into the district even on a temporary basis as we get schools back into session? A lot of kids are going through some trauma here too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention something that's pretty unique. We have already relocated. It's been a couple weeks now, maybe longer, 4 schools that were burned down in Palisades, and I toured 2 of the 4. What's amazing about it is 3 of them are in repurposed office spaces. One of them is called the Village School. They're repurposing a 65,000 square foot office space in Santa Monica that was not being utilized. Our economic development chief, Jennifer Taylor, worked rigorously amongst all heads of planning, and we made that as part of our emergency order to prioritize schools to make sure any CUPs or permitting that we cut through red tape and made that process as easy and as fast as possible. And so far, we have 4 schools here. We're working with Palisades High. And then also, as far as Pali High is concerned, or any other public school in Palisades, yes, they are allowed to come in. There's no questions about space. There is space made available to all Palisades. And I do know, because my kids are at Samo High, that there are some Palisades students there now. As far as Santa Monica Malibu schools weren't structurally impacted by the fire, but road closures impacted some days at school, and where there was closure, maybe there was virtual opportunities, so they weren't missing the school day, but they are all fully open and operating now. And assuming the weather permits and road closures, don't start to have to be, and if we don't have to close PCH or any of the roads going into some of those Malibu schools, I see us continuing to be open and functioning as usual. There's nothing that says that wouldn't be the case. But yeah, we have made space for Palisade schools, and we are continuing to do it. And it's a great show that we can repurpose a lot of this empty office space that we have, and we're giving them access to our nearby public parks and open spaces, and everyone's being very creative and making sure that we prioritize our children in our neighboring communities and making sure that they get to go in person to school, because that's obviously very important for mental health.
Very, very important, Madam Mayor, and I hope as you're taking influx of students from other school districts that the state's able to reimburse you for those costs, but we can have that discussion at another time. But thank you, Mr. Vasquez.
Yes.
Unless there's any other questions, the only other question I had for you is, we're going to be hearing from our senator in a little bit. Is there anything that you think it should be included in some of this legislation that's going to come down. There's several people that are interested, both on the Assembly and the Senate, to provide some leadership and bills that hopefully would not only expedite, but hopefully help financially some of these folks that need to rebuild, whether it's a business or a home.
Yeah, I think that, as we look at CEQA and what the governor has done, which has been great in terms of lifting a lot of the bureaucratic red tape and issues around CEQA for the burn areas, we would like to see, that extended beyond the burn areas, right? Because we know we have a housing shortage, and we know that housing stock, there's been some constraints also there that where housing stock, rental stock is not available now because our zip codes were left off these HUD requirements. And so the governor made a good start with anything that's 4 bedrooms and above. It doesn't have to apply to those HUD rates, but he also included some zip codes that didn't include Santa Monica, which meant that 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom, and smaller rental stock came off the market. So that's something that, I don't know if that's the place for the Senate to consider. Maybe that's a request of the governor's office. But in terms of policy making, I think, and bills going forward, I think as we look at what we were able to do with CEQA in the burn area to expedite building, I think we need to consider doing that across the state, because we've had this housing shortage, and often that is the tie-up. And in terms of financial relief, I just want to remind people I have many friends who lost their homes, some of which are on fixed incomes because they're senior citizens. And so I think there's this idea that, at least in the Palisades fire, that the majority of that population are flush with money and they can afford this, and they were all insured. A lot of people are underinsured, whether it be the FAIR plan or an insurance, and the deductibles are so high that they may never rebuild again. And so I hope that there is, a bill out there that considers the folks that may not have access to new money to be able to rebuild, and that was their whole life. We need to consider that a lot of these people were gifted their family legacy homes and might have only been barely keeping up with property taxes and the cost of maintaining their property. And, hopefully we can figure out some structure to bring back the diverse, unique community that was the Palisades. I mean, obviously there was a lot of multi-million-dollar homes, but there was also a small community that existed that had an aging population that made the community unique. And there was also a lot of people who worked and lived in the back of homes that gave them an opportunity to have their kids go to their schools. So I hope we consider that as we look at rebuilding, helping to rebuild that community back.
We have another question here from our chair, Member Gaines. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Negrete. I appreciate all your comments. I'm just curious, you talked a little bit about your own business and then also serving as mayor. So it sounds like your own business has suffered. So I'm just curious, how's that coming along? You're obviously very busy as mayor too, so.
And I've got kids. And I run a nonprofit
And kids,
that
there you
works
go.
with at-risk. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also run a nonprofit that works with at-risk youth. So my business is a legacy family business. It was started 52 years ago by my father, who just passed away. It's a music store, and we have 4 revenue streams. We do repairs for all the public schools for all their instruments, including repairs for UCLA as well, some for SC, and we had multiple schools, some of which have burned down in the Palisades. We also teach lessons. So about 27% of our customers came from the Palisades area. We have 10 studios where we teach private lessons, group lessons. And then we also have a retail portion where we sell instruments and supplies. And then we have a rental program. So our rental program allows people to rent like a $2,000 tuba for, $85 a month, or a $600 violin for $25 a month. Well, the folks that lost their instruments, normally we would have to look at their insurance and file a claim, but we just told people, we'll replace your instrument, we'll take care of that later. We didn't realize how many people were going to be coming in and doing that. So we've been impacted in multiple ways. We've lost instruments by way of they've been burned down in our rental contracts, right? So we have to replace those. we've been giving instruments to folks who have lost it. Our nonprofit makes sure that it makes people whole. So we were kind of donating from that. And then also we've lost a customer base who now doesn't have the disposable income to pay for private music lessons, which I totally understand. So, the ripple effect of the economic catastrophe is yet to be seen because many of us, myself, I can say, was doggy paddling because from 2020 we had COVID, then we were looted, set on fire at our other location during the May 31st civil unrest. And then from that point on, we were robbed multiple times, our glass broken. So for us and many businesses like ours, we've experienced a lot of loss. And then this happened as we're competing with the new brick and mortar versus online retail market. It's just really hard for businesses to sustain. And, right after this happened, we had our sales tax due. So I just am, as mayor, I'm trying to connect as a brick and mortar retail owner, someone who's born and raised in my community, who's also a renter and doesn't own the commercial building that I'm in. I'm reminding people that we have to support our local economy. And so instead of toning down events or sort of feeling like we can't celebrate our local businesses, it's quite the opposite. We have to continue to do those things. Otherwise, we won't be able to help our regional partners and if we can't help ourselves.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it, and that's very tough, and I feel for you. I appreciate the fact that you've stepped up to serve as the mayor of Santa Monica. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know you got to run, I know you have kids, so you probably need to go pick them up, but I appreciate at least being able to
Did I
watch.
pause or am I off? I'm following in our former mayor's footsteps, Mr. Vasquez.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming in and giving us your insights. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. If there was anything else I would say about a bill package is it's considering especially our small and mid-sized businesses and the constraints they have and however we can make concessions for folks who, looking at our sales and whatnot and seeing how we can help those businesses stay afloat so they can continue to provide jobs and provide a local economy and a robust tax revenue generator for our local cities and governments.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Kelly,
Thank you.
take care.
Well, we're continuing to wait for our next speaker. I don't have them on the line yet. So we might, if we want to just take a quick 5 or 10-minute break, I could work with your staff to see when we could get them on the line.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
So it is, let's say, 3 o'clock, 3:10.
3:10.
Okay, thank you.
me get,
Yeah, hold on one second. Let's try to get back. Are we okay back there?
we're gonna get queued up
We
here
got
with
the heads up.
AT&T.
Okay. So the board meeting is reconvening right now at 3:18. And we are at the item number 12. Yes, I've got the high sign. We're up at item number 12, which is proposed legislative solutions. Input on disaster relief proposals recently introduced in the legislature. Their representative potential impacts and analysis on possible support for key legislation. We have our first speaker today is Honorable Sasha Renee Perez, Senator, California State District 25. Thank you for participating. Mr. Vasquez.
No, thank you. This is one of our rising stars from Los Angeles. Senator Sasha, I met her when she was actually first a delegate for me, then all of a sudden got to be the mayor of Alhambra, and now she's the senator. And actually, you represent all of Altadena, I believe.
Yes, I do. I represent all of Altadena and Pasadena and a huge chunk of the Angeles National Forest, so everywhere that the Eaton Fire's impacted.
Appreciate you joining us. If you could just kind of give us a little insight in terms of what, I know you've been working on several pieces of legislation for this, and see what we can do to either support or facilitate or assist.
Certainly. So, I'll go over, I think, a couple of issues that constituents have brought up to me that I think are most relevant to you all over at the Board of Equalization, as well as policy that we're working on that I think that would be relevant to your work. First and foremost, I think some of the major concerns that we've heard from folks that have lost their homes is, what are they going to do about property taxes, right? Am I going to have to continue to pay my property taxes on a home that is no longer there? And I do want to recognize LA County Assessor Jeff Prang, who's just been so tremendous in responding to some of those concerns, making sure that people know how to access relief through his website, the options that are available, the application process. He's been really active and, explaining and addressing some of those concerns. Another issue that came up was something specifically related to those multi-generational homeowners in Altadena, particularly Black homeowners as well as Latino homeowners that had lived in the area for several generations. And that was that we had found through the assessor's office that many of those families hadn't transferred over property ownership from maybe grandma or great grandma who may have passed away at this point, and transferred that ownership over to the current member of the family living in the home. And we had discovered if they did go ahead and do that transference, they could be liable for up to 8 years of back taxes. And that was obviously not something that we wanted to place on individuals who had already gone through so much hardship, lost their homes, and are already struggling to navigate the situation. And so we've introduced legislation in partnership with the LA County Assessor's Office to basically waive those back taxes and those fees so that they wouldn't be held liable for that. And that is something that we're specifically targeting towards, as I mentioned before, those multi-generational homeowners that are in that particular circumstance and have lost their homes. In addition to that, we've received letters from several local government agencies that have raised concerns about challenges with loss of tax revenue as a result of the fires. As you could probably imagine, we lost an entire community. Almost all of Altadena's business corridor is gone. About 80% of Altadena was impacted by the fires. You have huge sections of streets. And so that means, all of those folks that were living and shopping and spending their hard-earned dollars in the community have been displaced in places as far as Anaheim, Joshua Tree, which are hours away from Altadena and Pasadena. In addition to that, we've seen real impacts on local business for nearby downtown centers like Old Town Pasadena in the city of Pasadena. And so we're really seeing big economic impacts with, folks that just weren't shopping during that time period, and weren't going out because they were concerned about air quality, concerned about other issues. And I know the city of Pasadena has made a real effort to try to encourage people to come back out, to shop locally, to try to make up for some of those dollars. But already we've heard from local government agencies saying we want to make sure SB1 dollars aren't being impacted. We want to make sure that we're still getting the tax revenue that we expected to get, that we're going to be held harmless, despite the fact that this has happened in our community. So those are some of the major issues that have come up. Some of those things are budget item requests that I've been working through and bringing up during our regular budget and fiscal committee. Other pieces we're trying to work through legislation on that, and just continuing to partner with folks and to listen to community members to see what they need next. So I've certainly appreciated all of your partnership. Board member Vasquez, he's just been so active and coming out to visit with our Altadena residents and answering questions in person, and it's made a tremendous difference. So just really value all the time that he's taken to make sure that our community is being supported.
Thank you. Let me start with a couple of questions, and I'll turn it over to some of my colleagues here. First of all, thank you for your time and work. It seems like every community meeting I've gone to, you've been there, and I have missed some, and I know you've been to some that I haven't gone to. So I really appreciate the effort and time that you put into this. And I'm just wondering, I know you've been supportive of a number of bills, and in terms of the allocation, I guess it's $2.5 billion in the budget for wildfire relief. My question is, I'm very interested in SB 293, which would help property owners bring their property records up to date without a penalty.
Yes.
Of those communities affected by the fires in January, is there an issue that is particularly concerned to your constituents in Altadena?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. SB 293 is the bill that I had mentioned that we are doing in partnership with LA County Assessor Jeffrey Prang. He had told me, and you'll need to double check with him on the numbers, but if I remember correctly, it is about 15% of Black homeowners in Altadena that have not transferred ownership of their property. And so it's one of the largest percentages actually in the entire county. And these are multi-generational households, right? They're passing on the home from family member to family member. So they haven't necessarily, done that paperwork, but we want to make sure that as they're going through this process, that they're not being hit with additional back taxes and fees. So we're trying to waive all of that for them so that they can go through the process to transfer title and do what they need to do as they go through this rebuilding process.
And a second question kind of tied into that is there any existing leeway for people to bring their records up to date without penalties?
Not that I know of, and that is actually part of the reason why the assessor approached me about doing state legislation. He wanted to create an avenue to be able to do that. And that's part of the reason why we're moving forward with this bill.
And you mentioned in your opening remarks about several, not only businesses, but homeowners really concerned and worried about the property tax bill that they're going to receive here pretty soon. What can we do on our end to help you try to put these people at ease or at least give them some support?
I think just communicating out what the options are for relief. Like I said, Jeffrey Prang, our assessor, has been so active in that, attending community meetings, doing press conferences, and really making clear to folks that if you have lost your home in the fire, there are options available for you. And I think that that's just been tremendously helpful. So any resources that you all have to that point, I think will definitely be of assistance. And I will say I know you mentioned this, business community as well and small business community. And as I mentioned, Altadena, entire commercial corridor has been wiped out. And their commercial corridor was mostly small businesses. These folks need a lot of support. They've all made very clear to me. I haven't talked to a single business owner who hasn't told me that they want to rebuild. They all want to rebuild. They all want to get back to business. They're very committed to the community. And I want to make sure that we're helping them every step in the way. We're doing legislation to make sure that we're extending the moratorium that exists that the insurance commissioner, Ricardo Laura, created for homeowners, that 1-year moratorium on cancellations, that we're extending that to commercial properties as well, and commercial owners. So commercial insurance will also have a moratorium as well.
Thank you. Let me turn to my colleagues. Chair Gaines has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate your concern and your moving forward with this great bill, which I think will address part of the challenge of rebuilding. My concern is the speed. It's so important, I think, for people to be able to move through that process as quickly as possible. So I hope the Senate, I hope you and other affected legislators are taking a look at the speed process, applying the pressure that I think needs to happen at the local level to make sure that individuals can get those permits as quickly as they need. My concern is that you have desire for people to rebuild, but I think that desire may wane over time if they can't get through the process in a timely manner. And I'm concerned about your base, your business base, and the ability to retain that over time. And of course, with homeowners, I think you'll have the same scenario that some folks may just be older and they're going to cash out. But for those that want to stay in the community and help rebuild it, that speed is so critical.
Absolutely. I mean, this has been a top concern, I think, for all of us at every level of government, state, city, county, and federal, right? So the governor has made really clear that he is going to cut through as much bureaucratic tape as possible to streamline this process. The County of Los Angeles Supervisor Catherine Barger has set up a one-stop shop for folks to get through all of their permitting all in one place, and has staff there and present so that there are people in person to assist you with that process. And that is open. There's a physical place you can go to in Altadena to get that done. And I know Mayor Karen Bass is doing the same thing for the city of Los Angeles. In addition to that too, I would also say, this is an area I think we're going to have to continue to coordinate around, right? New issues come up, new challenges come up. We've talked with, for example, private schools that are moving students on their campus to another campus temporarily because the school burnt down. And then there's delays with the permitting issues because they have to expand their campus. So we're troubleshooting as these things are coming up. And as I mentioned before, just working together with every level of government to make sure that this is making sense for people and they're not getting lost and stuck in this overly complicated process.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think as a former mayor, you have kind of an inside track in terms of how local government operates. So I think that's helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question here for my deputy controller here.
Thank you, Member Vasquez. Senator, welcome. My heart goes out to you in this time in your entire district. We're celebrating Black History Month in the month of February, and Altadena is known for being a place of Black excellence. Twice the national Black ownership rate is in Altadena, and now in this time of vulnerability, I would say, people depend on their government to protect them. And is there any work that you're doing around like price gouging, possible looting, and just types of enforcement where people are getting taken advantage of in this moment of vulnerability?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of things I'm doing. I'm joint authoring legislation with Senator Suzette Valladares. This is a bipartisan effort that we are leading to increase the penalty for those that impersonate a police officer or a firefighter in order to loot. during times of crisis. This was unfortunately something that we saw happen both in Altadena and in the Palisades, and frankly was just so shocking and disturbing to me to see people go to new lows during such a devastating time period. In addition to that, I'm principal co-author on a bill that Senator Bob Archuleta is leading, and that is to increase the penalty for those that are looting during wildfires and during natural disasters events like this. Senator Angelique Ashby and I are authoring legislation that's looking at extending some of the rules around price gouging and to prevent price gouging. We've also had conversations with the Attorney General's office about extending the price gouging time period, that the limits on that. I think originally it was only 90 days. We've been talking with them about extending that period beyond the 90 days. And we are still looking at legislation to look at holding those predatory land speculators accountable. We've heard several stories of these predatory speculators coming in and trying to make lowball offers to Black residents and Latino residents to take advantage of them during their worst moment. And for I think some of these folks, right, that are being offered $100,000, $200,000 cash, that's more money than I've certainly ever seen in my lifetime. And when you've lost absolutely everything, that might sound like a good offer. And so, we are looking at ways that we can better hold those folks accountable who are preying on people in that way. We know that the governor has now made that a misdemeanor, and we're still exploring ways that we can go about preventing that from happening. I know the community has started up a grassroots effort called Altadena Not for Sale, and have really become activated in pushing these people out of the community.
Thank you, Senator. Seems like you're very, very on top of it. I appreciate all your efforts here. Thank you.
Vice Chair Lieber has a question for you.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here today. And I don't have as much of a question as I just wanted to give you kudos for all the work that you're doing and point out that all of the depth thinking that you're engaging in is going to help other parts of California as well, because we know that unfortunately due to climate damage, wildfire is going to be a part of our state year-round ongoing. And I think before this catastrophe, it was pretty unheard of to have these types of wildfires in the height of the winter. But I think the work that you're engaging in and the co-authorship of the number of measures that you mentioned are really going to be very helpful for our state in the future, because you're creating a mold that other communities will be able to use. So thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And, I hope and I pray that no other community has to go through an event like this, but I realize that unfortunately that is likely not going to be the case. And, we just have to be better prepared for situations like this as they come up. Another bill that I'm going to be leading is going to be on creating a statewide response system so that we are better prepared for situations like this. Regardless of what jurisdiction somebody may be in, I think this is an area where we need one unified response that comes from Cal OES.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, want to thank you for spending some time with us. And you're right, our assessor, Jeff Prang's been really active. And actually, your Senate Pro Tem McGuire, I've run across him a couple of times at some of those hearings and community meetings in your district. So give him a shout out and thank him as well.
Thank you. No, I absolutely will do that. And thank you so much, Board Member Vasquez. I just appreciate all of your leadership as well. You've been a great partner.
Thank you. With that, Ms. Cicchetti, I think we have another speaker coming on.
We are waiting for Senator Allen to get on the line. I'm not so sure if we know if he's coming. So that's who we're waiting for. Unless you want to, we could go to just that we could just go to the closing remarks for the informational hearing, unless you want to try to go out to the AT&T moderator again to see if there's anybody in the public who wanted to make a
Sure,
public comment.
let's see if anybody
Okay.
wants to
well,
weigh in.
Sure, okay, we could try that right now. So this is a public comment on the informational hearing. AT&T moderator, is there anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment regarding this item?
And if you would like to make a public comment at this time, please press 1 followed by 0 on your phone. And again, on the phones, if you would like to make a public comment on this item, it is 1, then 0. And we have no lines in queue.
Thank you, moderator. All right, let's see if I could find out any status on Senator Allen. If not, then we could probably move forward. If you don't mind, we could go to the next item, which is the closing remarks for the informational hearing. And then if in fact
I see Vice Chair with their hand up. Go ahead.
I don't want to appear overly eager to close, but I just wanted to give my kudos to our board colleague, Mr. Vasquez, for bringing this topic back. It is obviously going to be a big part of our lives in terms of our work over the coming year and in terms of our involvement in the legislature. And I really appreciate the perspectives that we have had, and I've been able to have some conversations with Ben Allen as well, and I'm sure he'll be joining us if he can. But it's really going to take all Californians pulling together to share these lessons learned and to really be the captains of our own ships economically as well, along with our local elected partners. And I appreciate this board's sense of really funneling our compassion for these communities into some very wise legislative solutions. And I'm just so thankful that we have the governor that we do, who is so effective at showing his compassion in a really tangible way when Californian communities are suffering. And there's been some very hard lessons learned for many, many people in Southern California. These losses, the loss of life there, the loss of important possessions in people's lives, even the loss of the natural environment and of family pets are just really irreplaceable. But I think we're demonstrating to all of our country and all of the world the way that we come together as Californians to take care of our own. And it really kind of chokes me up and but makes me tremendously proud that we are the preeminent state that recognizes the value of our diversity and puts that into concrete terms in terms of acting with compassion and inclusion and making sure that we have an equitable approach to every person's needs and opportunities and fundamental value going forward. So I think this is a topic that calls on us to think very deeply about who we are as a state. And I'm just so pleased with this legislature and this governor at this very impactful time. And having been a Californian now for 33 years, I can't say that I've personally ever seen a time when we were as vulnerable as we are right now. and we're not coming apart at the seams, we're coming together at the seams. And it's very, very inspiring and makes me really proud to be a Californian. So those are my closing remarks, and I hope we don't hear something really juicy and great that demands a response, because I kind of promised to not double dip on my closing remarks. Thank you.
Not a problem. I just got a text from the senator. He's literally running over to his office. I guess he was finishing up a hearing in the caucus. But you're right. I think at the end of the day, before we had a certain time of the year, they said it was fire season. It seems like it's year round now with the weather, the way it's changing so much. I don't know if anybody, I'll go along with the chair. Go ahead, Member
I'll
Gaines.
make some closing
Go ahead.
remarks. So I just want to thank you, Member Vasquez, for bringing this issue forward. And again, your accommodation for me to come down and see the real damage of the fires. And I think this is exactly how we ought to be engaged as members of the BOE. So if it's property related, tax related, we ought to be seeking out ways, opportunities, solutions for the challenges that lie ahead. And the engagement with the legislature, I just think, is critical. And I see that relationship growing and getting stronger and clearer lines of communication. So I see that as very hopeful for the future. And these bills that I'm hearing about, I think are going down the right path in terms of trying to provide some relief. So thank you very much.
Deputy Controller, go ahead.
Thank you, Member Vasquez. I want to thank you for your leadership in putting this together in quick order as well. Something's been at the top of, I'll hold my comments if the senator's on.
Well-
Senator, can you hear me? I think you're muted. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
There you go. Okay. All right. Great.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
There you go. Okay. Excellent.
Thanks for joining us. I know you're super busy. I was actually at the Capitol earlier and I bumped into you in the hallway and you were jumping from one meeting to the next.
Yes. Yes. I apologize. I apologize for the late. I'm literally triple booked right now, but I will say, to your credit, you guys locked this down much earlier than everybody else. But
So we should have bumping rights, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said I got to be on BOE. I got to come down. So it's good to see you, and I know you've had a number of good folks that have come and brought testimony about wildfire legislation and all the conversations that are happening in the Capitol right now on this really difficult topic. So good afternoon. I'm Senator Ben Allen. I represent the West Side, Hollywood, Coastal South Bay, and Santa Monica Mountains communities of LA County. That, of course, includes the Pacific Palisades and Malibu communities that were devastated by the Palisades fire last month. I just want to send a special shout out to Board Member Vasquez, who was with me at so many of the press conferences and events as we were trying to work with our grieving community that's just been dealing with so many challenges associated with these fires. Again, thank you to the board for hosting this meeting today. Again, you guys are providing an important venue for important policy issues that have interaction with tax policy that sometimes don't get a deep enough dive in the legislature. And I just want to thank you for consistently identifying and having these conversations, and look forward to the participation and mutual work that we're going to do together on this incredibly important topic. The victims of the fires have been dealing with so much, and ultimately it's about better understanding their challenges and trying to craft policies that will address the challenges that they have been facing. First of all, just on the ground, as Tony knows, we've gone from these terrible wildfires, incredible dryness, low humidity, to atmospheric rivers that are now causing mudslides in burn areas. And so folks are that's created a whole new level of challenge associated with the rebuild, and what are some of the things that are being discussed right now in the legislature? So the legislature, I know you've talked a bit to Sasha. I wasn't on the call earlier, but I'm sure she spoke a little bit about all of the work that's been happening on the Senate side. There's similar work happening on the Assembly side as well. I will say our Senate President Pro Tem, Mike McGuire, unfortunately, though fortunately for us in a weird way, has had so much experience with fire in his own home district over the years, representing Lake County and Santa Rosa, and amount of wine country. So he's gone through this so many times. And so when this fire hit, he knew immediately, how to help us. He's been down in the district already, I want to say 4 or 5 times. We're going to be touring Malibu, the PCH, some of the impacts on the coastline tomorrow. Again, the Senate has officially introduced this package of 13 bills. I've got a bill that I'm working on with LA County Assessor Jeff Prang to provide property tax relief flexibility. So I wanted to focus on that for a little bit because your focus is, of course, on taxes, and tax liability and assessment. So as you know, there are a few ways to receive property tax relief in the wake of natural disasters, including property tax reassessments on damaged or destroyed properties, and the ability for property owners to transfer the base tax year of their original home to the new construction. Now, current law requires misfortune and calamity claims to be filed within 12 months of the disaster to receive a reassessment. And then homeowners are then provided 5 years to rebuild their homes to transfer the tax year. Now, unfortunately, the significant magnitude of destruction that occurred, and we also know there's now going to be so much impact on the rebuild just logistically, because of supply chain, because of labor shortages. Now we have all the additional challenges from Washington, D.C. with tariffs and threatened deportations. And then, of course, also lessons learned. I mean, even in the past, we know things end up getting delayed much more than anticipated. So we know that some additional property tax flexibility and relief are going to be needed. Homeowners are navigating the trauma of losing their homes, securing temporary housing, trying to get their kids placed in school, and dealing with how do they keep their work going. So the idea here is that filing misfortune and calamity claims within the existing 12-month deadline could be difficult. So we're trying to help provide them with some flexibility on that front. Additionally, rebuilding after a disaster is a complex task. Residents have to grapple with insurers, competition for contractors, permitting, etc. Just as an example, according to the data from the city of Malibu, only about 1/3 of the 500 homes that were destroyed during the Woolsey fire have been rebuilt to date. And something like 20 times the number of structures have been destroyed in the Palisades and Altadena communities than were destroyed in the Woolsey fire. And so, and with all these headwinds and challenges nationally and internationally with regards to all the things I mentioned and the international supply chain market, we're concerned that there's going to be an even longer rebuild period ahead. So, the other challenge we've seen in tax law is that for areas of our charitable nonprofits, hospitals, religious organizations, they don't have a lot of flexibility. These are institutions that receive property tax exemptions that only apply while the property is being used for those purposes. And so something like a dozen religious institutions have been significantly damaged or destroyed. They will technically lose their property tax exemptions because now that the properties are destroyed, those properties are no longer being used for the qualified purpose. So these are all the things we're trying to address with the bill. We're going to extend the deadline for victims to file misfortune and calamity claims from 12 months to 24 months. We're going to allow for up to 8 years for homeowners to rebuild, to transfer their base tax year. And then we're looking to also extend the special property tax exemptions of qualified institutions, these nonprofits, religious institutions, et cetera, for up to 8 years. Now, I've also had some conversations with some members of the board and the assessor about some additional ways to provide relief, including on undamaged properties that have experienced a decline in value due to the destruction of the surrounding community. And because that's a massive issue too, right? I mean, these are not habitable homes. Just because you haven't lost your home doesn't mean that your home hasn't suffered tremendous damage, at least from a property value perspective, but also from a physical perspective, the smoke damage, et cetera. Also, we're looking to provide some relief to seniors who are unable to complete property tax base year transfers prior to the fire. So I'm looking forward to continuing conversations to maximize the relief we can provide to victims. But this is a big bill that we're working on right now together. And I really, it has a lot to do with your jurisdiction. And I welcome the board's input and engagement and cooperation and hopefully sponsorship as we move forward. We'll present that more formally to you when it's all ready and tied up in a bow for your consideration for sponsorship later if you want, or earlier now if you want to as well. I'm also joint authoring a bill that I'm sure Senator Perez mentioned to expand protections for homeowners and tenants, mobile home residents in the wake of emergencies. I'm sure she talked about that. We've also got the Bipartisan Fight for Firefighters Act, which is led by our President Pro Tem, Senator McGuire, which, as you probably have heard, transitions the nearly 3,000 seasonal firefighters under CAL FIRE to year-round permanent positions. There's a bunch of other bills that are in the package, speeding up residential rebuilds following a state of emergency. That's a Wahab bill. There's a Rubio bill to create an insurance community hardening commission to create data-driven statewide minimum fire standards for mitigation. There's a Perez bill, I'm sure she spoke about, that seeks to create a commercial insurance non-renewal moratorium expansion. Limon's got a bill that extends CEQA streamlining for LA fires and other disasters. I know Stern's got a bill that creates more flexible licensing for nursing homes and assisted living facilities that have been destroyed or damaged in the fires. And then by the way, that's the official Senate package. It's actually limited, believe it or not. Many members are stepping forward with additional bills on a lot of topics that, quite frankly, are not being addressed adequately by the official Senate package. So there's gonna be a lot, and I think it's just gonna take. Maybe we ought to get together again at your next meeting to just do an update on all the additional bills that have been introduced. But I certainly think I have 6 or 7 additional bills beyond the official package. And I know that a lot of my colleagues are introducing similar additional bills as well. Now, what are some of the other discussions that are happening around this space? I mean, I think that there's an opportunity for us to reevaluate the ways that we are planning housing and communities in places with high fire risk. And we're certainly, one of the things that we're looking at is proposals to account for the dangers of climate change and the need for increased resiliency to fires in these areas. I know the Senate's exploring additional funding opportunities in this year's budget to directly help families. So supporting displaced K through 12 students in school districts, impacted community colleges. There's also, of course, a lot of money that we're going to look to put into community hardening and resilience, including in the bond that I authored, Proposition 4, on the sub 2 chair, which is going to oversee all those bond expenditures. So there's certainly going to be a lot on forest management and brush management in a nature-friendly way that will do more to make sure that our communities are less susceptible to the damage, to potential wildfire damage in the future. Obviously, we all had a big hearing on insurance a couple of months ago that you all recall that I participated in. Obviously, insurance is now right back up on the front burner. It always has been, but all the more so right now, given the massive liabilities that we now face that have added to the already strained system. The commissioner, Commissioner Lara, is working with the legislature on a package of bills aimed specifically at insurance issues as they relate to the fire and the aftermath of the fire. So I've got a bill that seeks to eliminate the list. It's the Eliminate the List Act, which basically get funds into victims' hands faster by requiring insurance to pay disaster victims 100% of their policy's contents coverage without the tedious and often traumatizing task of creating an itemized list of all the things they lost in the fire. So right now, I mean, the idea being if you insure up to a certain amount and you've lost everything, and when you go to these homes, I mean, Tony knows this. I'm sure Ted visited Paradise. A lot of you guys have seen these disasters. When you go to see these homes, everything is gone. I mean, it's literally just ashes and foundation and twisted metal. So the idea that you're going to ask people to go create an itemized list for them to get their money. Again, people wouldn't be paying for the full insurance if they beyond what they already what they have. So we're asking them we're asking to remove the current cap of 30% of their items. or $250,000. And so, so then we would give victims at least 180 days to provide their insurer with proof of loss following a disaster, up from 60 days under current law. Some victims are just now returning to their homes to survey damage nearly 40 days after the fire. A couple other bills that are in the commissioner's package. There's one to create a fund to assist homeowners with wildfire hardening upgrades to their homes. There's another one that caps fees that third-party insurance adjusters can charge for contracted work. There's another one that creates an office in the Department of Insurance with the expertise to inspect properties for home hardening best practices. That's where we're going to put a lot of focus, encouraging people to really learn the lessons from this fire. A lot of homes did survive the ferocity of the fire, including areas where every other home was destroyed, and almost always it was because those homeowners had engaged in aggressive home hardening best practices as they built or remodeled their homes. There's another bill to provide disclosures that would provide disclosures on misleading advertisements following disasters. You see a lot of opportunists in this space. Another one that would allow the FAIR Plan to access emergency bonds through the Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, the iBank. And then finally, one that would create tax-exempt savings accounts for homeowners to set aside funds for home hardening measures and insurance deductibles. Again, I just want to mention again the importance of Prop 4, our climate bond, which is going to provide $1.5 billion for wildfire resilience and also water infrastructure strengthening. So that's going to be an important source of funding. It seems the governor's eager to get some of this money moving as quickly as possible. And I'm as I mentioned, chair of the budget subcommittee that oversees environmental protection and natural resources and the bond expenditures. And I'm certainly going to be very involved in the conversations that outline how these dollars are going to be spent. So anyway, that was a rapid fire description of all the things that are happening. But again, I just want to thank the board for hosting this hearing and for your continual interest in all these very relevant policy conversations that are happening in the Capitol. And I really do welcome your input and engagement as we seek to hone these measures. And you guys are going to be playing a really important role in tax policy moving forward. And tax policy is going to play an important role in and the extent to which we are responsive to the realities on the ground of these homeowners will make a big difference in whether they are able to rebuild in a quick and efficacious manner. And so thank you in advance for the partnership that I know that we will have together as we seek to do right by all the victims of these terrible wildfires.
Thank you, Senator. And let me start with a couple of questions, and I'll turn to my colleagues because I know they have questions for you as well. As you mentioned, our assessor, Jeff Prang, has been very proactive on this issue. And I know you're working on several bills with him. My question is that there are a number of aspects to the bill that address some of the needs that the assessor discussed earlier, including extending deadlines for applications under the RTC 170 and for construction under RTC 70.5. Do you believe that extending the RTC 170 application deadline for disaster relief for additional time, say 3 years instead of 2, would be helpful to the victims of these disasters?
Of course. And I think for folks who are not as close to the ground as you and I might be, I would just, first of all, I encourage all the board members to come down. I'm happy to personally, I know a couple of you have been down, happy to personally tour you around the site. But I think you will get a window into what a massive disaster this was, how widespread it was. And then there are just so many follow-on impacts associated with such a widespread disaster. It just makes it harder for people. There's just fewer contractors to go around, fewer, all of that infrastructure that is in place to help people rebuild is going to be so stretched. The LA Times has done some extensive reporting on this. And so, giving some additional time flexibility to people will be so helpful.
Appreciate it. Let me turn to my colleagues here. I'll start with the chair, Member Gaines. I know he has some questions for you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Senator Allen. Appreciate your continued participation in dealings with the BOE and certainly with the Southern California wildfires right in your district. But I was just curious as to whether there's been any conversations with home builders in California that might be able to come in into that devastated area. I'm thinking Palisades, where I saw, block after block after block of homes, where you might be able to get some economy of scale, working with maybe a few home builders that might be able to fast track certain home designs for folks and try to get those homes rebuilt as fast as possible. My concern is that, and I expressed this earlier with Senator Perez, is that as each day passes, I think more and more people are going to kind of fall out of line in terms of their ability to rebuild. And some of those folks may be older anyway. Maybe that's just maybe that's a new chapter in their life where they move on. But I think there's a lot of people committed to staying in their communities. And so I'm just trying to think of ways to streamline that process, certainly at the local level. I don't know if there's anything being done at the state level. Certainly your bill with an 8-year exemption is good, but I'd like to see those, can we get them to build those homes more quickly? And can we provide them any sort of exemption or tax credit? If someone's intending to rebuild their home, my concern is if it takes several years for the rebuilding to occur, which we don't want to happen, but maybe that will turn out to be the reality, you'll have some pent-up taxes that are due. And so my thought is a tax credit for someone remaining in the community and rebuilding, this might be a little bit more incentive for them to stay.
Yeah, I think we're all looking for fair, reasonable ways to provide people with relief and incentive. So, absolutely, it sounds like you're fleshing out the idea. I'm happy to chat with you about it, Ted, and we can incorporate something reasonable on those lines into the bill, because I agree that we this is ultimately all about making it easier for people to rebuild. Obviously, there's a lot of work that's underway right now to streamline permitting, and I will say the cleanup process has been at a record breaking pace, so that's been a good thing.
Good.
But yes, happy to chat with you about it, and let's work together on writing it in a way that will be meaningful for people.
Wonderful,
Helpful.
thank you. And just one other area, if I could bring it up, because we've had a lot of wildfires in my district over the years.
I guess well, the one thing I would say is, especially, I guess I'm especially interested in incentivizing kind of pro-social rebuild, like a smart rebuild. So, for example, if you are rebuilding with the best practices, fire mitigation, construction materials, and
Yeah.
landscaping, that would
Yeah.
be something that I would want to help to incentivize. So
Right.
Yeah.
Tile roofs, stucco, concrete, enclosed eaves, no exposed wood showing, things like that just make a lot of sense, don't they?
Yeah.
I was curious because of the wildfires in our region, and you were talking about Prop 4. I think there's so much need statewide for this wildland-urban interface, right? And that we're not doing enough. Like, I worry about Placerville. I feel like if a big fire started west of Placerville, it would go right up through that ravine and take out the whole town.
Yeah.
But I think this, in terms of mitigation and doing a lot of work on the forest area surrounding communities up and down the state would be helpful. Another area I worry about is West Lake Tahoe, the West Shore. I'm still not seeing much change, and we had that Angora fire back when I was in the Assembly in '08. And when I go to the Nevada side, I see much more clearing that has occurred. I haven't seen it in other parts around Lake Tahoe, but it's kind of the same story up and down the state. And I know that there was challenges down in Pacific Palisades with members of the community that didn't want the prescriptive burning. There were complaints.
Right.
And so now you've got a challenge with CAL FIRE trying to get out there and do the right thing,
Right.
but the community not wanting it. And I think maybe the culture is changing, right? After such
Yeah.
a traumatic fire, I think maybe it's closer in people's minds in terms of making sure that we're putting up with, some issues that aren't simple or may upset our personal lives a little bit in exchange for better safety.
Right. That's right. I think, look, I think that this is a game, this fire is so destructive, so painful that it's got to be a game. I think it's a game changer in terms of people's mentality about so many things. And by the way, I would hope, I guess the other thing is while I do hope we also spend some time thinking about, the wisdom of incentivizing additional new construction deep in the very high fire risk zones. And I know this is a sensitive subject, but unless that construction is done very carefully, it's going to create all sorts of new liabilities for the years out ahead. It's not just the burn; it's also the utilities, it's the insurance market, it's all of those things. And I know this is a tough conversation for us all to have, but we have to have it.
Right, right. And I think part of that, is going to be taken care of just by rising insurance rates. I mean, if you look at, I live in El Dorado County, and it's sad, but people's rates are going up dramatically. But I think what's going to happen is that those rates are going to more reflect the risk for folks. If you are living in a forested area, you're just going to pay a lot more for your insurance. And I think folks, what used to be an affordable county may not be as affordable. So maybe people won't move out as far to get that affordable home because the insurance cost is going to change that dynamic.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not just possible, it's probably likely.
Yeah. So thank you. Appreciate
Thank you, Ted.
your legislation and staying in communication with us and how we can work together.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Lieber, I think, has a question for you.
Thank you, Senator, for being here. And I don't have any additional asks for you, but I just appreciate the really comprehensive approach to the need for policy infrastructure in these areas that you're taking. And I know that you're doing it within the overall rubric of a greatly diminished number of bills that you can do.
Yes.
So I just want to thank you so much for all the really thoughtful work that you're doing in this area. It's heartening. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard.
My Deputy Controller has a question for you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Thank you, Senator Allen. Always nice to see you and appreciate you always being a partner to this board, even
Likewise.
in the most precarious of times. I wanted to talk my question on firefighting capabilities and this idea that, hey, you know what, I can come back to my home or my area, my property, rebuild, but what's stopping the next fire from coming and wiping my neighborhood out again? And something Senator Perez and we heard from the Department of Finance earlier, they were talking about CAL FIRE and the state's investment in CAL FIRE, and I think it's at $2 billion now. They've doubled the number of positions since 2018. It's a 47% increase. We now have the largest aerial fleet. I know we're using C-130s, we're using specific helicopters, even night vision technology, because my understanding is beforehand they were not making drops in the nighttime before this technology came immersive. So can you talk to us a little bit about these investments in firefighting capabilities in CAL FIRE and LA County Fire Department and LA City Fire Department as well, and how we can continue to invest in our firefighters? You talked a little bit about the Firefighters Act with Senator Pro Tem McGuire as well.
No, I just met with the leadership of CAL FIRE yesterday, in fact, to talk about their budget asks, and they're obviously looking to expand. I mean, it's all the technologies you just mentioned and more. I think everyone's also interested in more smart brush clearance. And that's expensive, but I think important around where structures where people live. One thing to mention, by the way, I've learned something that I wasn't even aware of myself, that apparently landowners are able to pay for brush clearance on public lands up to 200 feet away from their properties. And it's a relatively easy process for most of the conservancies, for example. So I want to throw that out there as an interesting thing that's happening as people have taken it upon themselves to pay for some of this additional brush clearance. But look, we're clearly having to shift to this new normal, which is that the fire season is now to some extent year round. We can't. Here was this massive fire happening in the middle of the winter in January. Not something we were ever used to before. So we're just going to have to be better prepared for this new normal. It's everything from greater investments in our firefighting capacity, but it's also, again, being smarter about the way we manage land, the way we develop, the way we build. I'd like to see us, quite frankly, grow and address our housing challenges in a way that also takes into account the very real climate risks that are out there with regards to fire or floods or sea level rise or anything else. But it's not what I will say. I do hope that in the future, as we consider our housing bills, that we differentiate between incentivizing and pushing for new housing construction in infill, transit oriented development, et cetera, versus in the very high fire risk zones, because it's ultimately out there that we're going to continue to need more and more firefighting resources. There's more risk associated with starting a fire because you have to send utility lines out there, et cetera. So, but look, firefighting infrastructure and investment is going to be a big part of the focus of the sub-2 committee, the budget sub-2 committee this year. And I very much welcome the controller, and deputy controller, your input, the board's input on things that we can do. We're going to be looking very carefully at all the asks from CAL FIRE. And obviously there's some budget constraints that we have this year as a state, but certainly, smart fire management investments are going to be a priority of our budget sub.
Understood. Thank you, Senator, and good luck.
Thank you.
And thank you, Senator. As you were talking about meeting with CAL FIRE, actually when Chair Gaines and myself were with CAL FIRES, I remember we asked them that question, what could you do to clear the brush? Would that have saved some of these homes in the Palisades? And I was kind of shocked to hear from him. He says, these 100-mile winds that came through there, it would have been difficult, which kind of tells us, and I think you kind of raised it earlier, is that I think at the end of the day, these are high-risk areas that the insurance rates are going to start reflecting that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I will say, the other comment that board member Gaines just made about controlled burns is a good one.
It is.
That same ferocious fire was stopped dead in its tracks when it was sweeping west toward Malibu because of the burn scar from the Franklin fire a month earlier. And as bad as that fire was, I remember I toured that fire. That was the fire that saved Malibu. At least that was the fire that saved the center and west of Malibu, because it was as bad a fire as it was certainly nowhere near as destructive as the Palisades fire, and it took away all the fuel that the Palisades fire would have used during those special high wind conditions and low humidity conditions to just keep sweeping west, and maybe it could have taken out the whole city. So. There's only so much we can do here. That's one of the, at the end of the day, when people ask, if we had the reservoir, filled, would that have made the difference? Or if we'd had a couple more fire trucks there, would that have made the difference? And most of the firefighters look you in the eye and say, I can't guarantee that. Obviously all those things would have helped, could have mitigated, but those conditions were so extreme and so difficult that most of the firefighters involved, you're absolutely right, Tony. They will say that that those conditions were so severe that it would have been hard to prevent, even if we'd had everything in place properly. So It's a scary lesson about the state of our climate right now and the risks that we are all bearing.
Seeing no other questions, I just wanted to thank you, Senator, and I know you have several bills, and as soon as you have those ready to go, by all means, share them, because we will definitely take a look at them, and as much as we can support, we will. Appreciate your time on this one.
Thank you. I very much, not only do I welcome the support, but in some respects, more importantly, the input, or just as important, the input and engagement from the board. You guys have so much expertise, both amongst the members and the staff on tax policy. And to the extent that all of these things are relating to various aspects of tax policy, we certainly welcome your input. But I appreciate your calling on me again, and look forward to working closely with you on these measures going forward.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank
Thanks
you, Senator
again.
Allen.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All righty.
All right. So,
With that, Mr. Kenny, I guess are we on closing remarks? I guess we're going back to
Yeah,
closing
going
remarks.
back to the closing remarks.
that's right. And I think we're with Member Emran. Did you want?
Okay.
He
Yeah.
was, up to him, yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I won't be long, trying to find my mid-sentence, but I just want to give a huge shout out to Member Vasquez again. It's one of the most beautiful areas in the world, Los Angeles and the whole Southern California, and it's something we should cherish, we should take care of. And unfortunately, some disasters struck, but sometimes in these moments of tragedy, you see these heroes, and I want to give a huge shout out to CAL FIRE, the Los Angeles Fire Department, CHP, first responders, the National Guards, everyone that was on the ground, risking their lives running towards the fire while there's evacuations occurring. And now this idea, as people try to look to rebuild, property taxes and taxes in general, and incentives and credits that Chair Gaines was talking about, it's at the top of people's minds. And this elected tax board is in a prime position to step up and disseminate this information, work with members of the legislature or assessors, and really help with this rebuild. It doesn't have to be a 5-10 year process. It can happen relatively quickly if we all put our collective minds together. I'm really confident in that. But it's been a great day and a lot of great information today. I'm looking forward to the next steps ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, seeing none. Just wanted to thank you again, Member Vasquez, for bringing forward a great presentation on wildfires in your district, and looking forward to providing some more, hopefully, answers and possible solutions as we move forward.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to put this out. And as we move forward, as we're hearing from both senators today and others out there, whatever we can do, I think, to support and weigh in, especially from our staff, would be appreciated.
Absolutely. Yeah, appreciate our staff and everything they're doing to help us in these efforts. And we will now adjourn, and the time is 4:18. The next board meeting will be Wednesday, March 26, 2025 at 10 a.m., right here at the May Lee State Office Complex here in Sacramento. So thank you.